Thank you for your time. My name is Beytullah. I appreciate you being here. Please keep in mind what we are doing here on Bet On It, Shooting from the Hip. We explore human ideas, philosophies, and noteworthy information. This exploration is us thinking aloud, a thought exercise, if you will, jumping into ideas and examining them and re-examining them. You will find we are prone to using adult language when expressing opinions. In keeping with that, you shouldn't believe anything we say. We are not experts of any kind. We are just having fun with these ideas, philosophies, and information. In the hopes you will find it fun and interesting and entertaining. We encourage you to invest time into searching out these subjects and coming to your own conclusions. Now, on with the shit show. How y'all doing today? I hope that that means you guys are doing excellent. Today's episode, we're going to be discussing the 1-inch punch, Fa Jin, and Neigong as it relates to the 1-inch punch. And something that's kind of noteworthy, a man who goes by the name of Dynamo Jack, and his name was John Chang. At least that's what this documentary that highlighted him alleges. So at any rate, let's just jump right in. So Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, it was something he made famous in the late 60s at the Long Beach, I think it was a karate championship, and he was given the stage and he did a demonstration where he presented the 1-inch punch. Now all you have to do is enter into the search window of YouTube 1-inch punch, and you'll see a wide variety of videos where he demonstrates it. Now, having said that, in that time, since his time, there hasn't been anyone who's actually produced the same effect, at least on camera. And for somebody who was so fascinated by it and committed years to try and figure out exactly what it was, and which we're gonna kind of dive into, at least the complexities of it. I mean, ultimately, what it is he demonstrated that over a very short distance, you could generate very significant amounts of force when delivering punches. Okay, so that's noteworthy in and of itself. So, and that's something that virtually anybody who's training can learn to do, right? But having said that, there still has yet been anyone who's produced the same degree of effects or put on a presentation and recorded it for public consumption in the way that he did. And there's very limited footage because it wasn't recorded more than just a few times. So anyway, at any rate, and there's tons of anecdotal accounts from individuals who he used as practice dummies when he delivered it. So having said all that, let's just dive into the mechanics of the 1-inch punch. So whether you believe that it's initially, my thinking was that it was something that was purely related to biomechanics, that you could reproduce it if you understood the biomechanics and then trained to produce that biomechanical effect, right? So again, it's the kind of thing that, like, at least from my generation of aspiring martial artists, we all strove to try and accomplish what he had done. So at any rate, so the Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch, it's estimated that he delivered between 230 and 470 pounds of force. So this is between 144 to 186 pounds of force to knock someone out. Sorry, let me rephrase that. So it's between 144 pounds to 186 pounds of force to knock someone out. It's 1,100 pounds of pressure force is required in order to break the skull. Our skulls are really impact resistant, and due to the way that it's designed and its shape, and the fact that bone is so resilient and it is resistant to impact. But again, not the kind of thing that we should count on a motorcycle. Highly recommend helmets. So this was this interesting idea that, you know, he was generating enough force that it could produce a knockout over a single inch, and he did a variation of the 1-inch punch, also known as the 6-inch punch. So throughout the demonstrations, he clearly showed that what we could see, or what you could do as an individual, is you could generate significant amounts of force over a short distance that would produce substantial effects. And we, you know, like I said, we understand that between 144 to 186 pounds of force is what's required to knock someone out, and 1,100 pounds of pressure or force is required in order to break the skull. So force production, especially as it relates to martial artists, is something significant. Why does that matter to the average person? This does overlap with the idea of self-mastery. Like the capacity to be able to do this, it kind of ties to the practice of martial arts, and this is just an example of like how far you can push the limits of what human beings are capable of doing. So again, to me, it's been something that has been endlessly fascinating. It's October 4th. What a beautiful day! It's like a summer day. But basically in about six weeks, I actually turned 60, and I'm still fascinated to this day with regards to how he was capable of doing it. And we'll explore that more deeply beyond the body mechanics and the science of it. So the posture of the 1-inch punch, his hips and shoulders are turned side on, and there's a clear connection to the rear leg and foot, and the path of force translating from the rear leg to the forward arm and hand. So this isn't any different than the kinetic chain that you would see a baseball pitcher adopt, where that through that posture and them taking that step and the rotating their body, so that would mean that like they're recruiting as much as their body mass, that the energy from that step translates up through the torso and out the opposite arm, which is the pitching arm, and throws like 100-mile-an-hour pitch. So this isn't, again, it's not unusual, and it's well within the capacity of the average human being to accomplish. Like, this is something that, again, for my generation, martial artists aspired to be able to perform that. Now, having said that, so we're talking about ground reaction forces that are approximately about 300 pounds of force, right? That he's able to draw up through the way he's standing, and then with the rotation and the twitch reflex of the shoulders and that limited range for making the delivery, he's able to generate significant amounts of force. So the body mechanics allow for energy transfer from the back leg to the fist. Right, so that side-on posture, you'll see that rear leg's important to it, and when he's making the delivery, that heel of that rear leg rises as there's a slight rotation in the torso to recruit the mass to produce all that force on delivery. So, and what you'll notice is if you ever watch any of the videos where he demonstrates that his body starts to sink slightly into a stance and then rises up and forward into the direction of the target while leaning slightly into and downward at the target. So it's like he's coming up and coming down with the slight rotation, and using that rear leg to catapult his body mass forward. So, so this ground reaction force is Newton's third law, and the force exerted by the ground on a body in contact with it. So that's what it's a reference to. And when a person is just standing, the ground reaction force corresponds with the person's weight. So when the body is moving, the ground reaction force increases due to acceleration forces. So it's a combination of accelerating, going from a standstill to slight rotation, that short distance to make the delivery, and that short distance to accelerate as fast as possible. So the physics of this 1-inch punch often is explained as kinetic linking. So you have muscular chains in the front and the back of the body, an anterior chain, a posterior chain, and all of them are linked in terms of contributing to really gross body movements. So to physicists, it's a kinematic chain. The entire human body, an assembly of kinematic chains. So it's just all these kinetic chains that are linked together. And good martial artists punch or kick with more than just arms and legs. So rotation, significant, recruiting their body mass into whatever delivery, whether you're doing a 1-inch punch or not, it doesn't matter. It applies to the mechanics of punching and kicking, right? So, and again, for somebody who's been fascinated with it most of their life and practiced it for the majority of their life, it's something I just find really, really interesting. And I, even at this advanced stage of life, I still gravitate towards it. I still find it one of those things that inspires me to want to always do better. Although, I am aging, so it that has to be a consideration in terms of the way that train and practice. But all this stuff is relevant regardless of what age you're at. So, so a punch action, for example, starts in the feet. Then that force translates into the anatomical leg, then into the thighs and into the pelvis. Whether you're kicking or punching, that's the initiation of the action. So as a kick, ladybugs everywhere. As a kick, once you reach the pelvis, then it's just the extension of the actually the flexion and extension of the leg, the anatomical leg, the flexion of the hip, and the delivery or the extension of the anatomical leg to deliver the kick. But if it's a punch, it moves all that kinetic force is moved through the pelvis into the torso, then into either arm to the end of the limb, producing a greater force than simply punching with the arm, right? So again, something that it's kind of very basic, and it's something that martial artists are keenly aware of and becomes part of the practice, right? So this kinetic energy is in the fist at the point of impact and determines the impact force. So all of that stuff, all the entire kinetic chain and all those muscles support that single action and then can produce an incredible effect. Energy and force is often used interchangeably in context of fighting. Not the same thing, related depending on how energy is amplified. So work is force applied over some distance. So this includes Newton's second law. Force equals mass times acceleration. And add the kinematic chain. The faster the mass moves, the more kinetic energy on impact. Object's velocity is more important than its mass. So whatever mass that you're able to recruit, it's the acceleration of that mass that produces, that imparts all that energy into whatever it is that you're striking, right? So there's some who break down like how the 1-inch punch imparts high force. the more distance a change in energy occurs with less force being imparted. So sometimes it's because of that short distance that you're able to produce that significant amount of force, because everything, you have to think of the body becoming a coiled spring, and then you're just letting it go, and then so that'll, a coiled spring will just, explode outwardly. That's essentially, the physics of a 1-inch punch. It's condensing the container and then unleashing it, and then it springing into action. So so what that can mean is towards the ends of that springing action, you lose force, right? As with less force being imparted at the end. So you want to, in the early stages or at the midway point, have the delivery make the impact on whatever it is that you might be striking. Like, so just one moment here. So crumple zones in any transportation structure are important since they are used to absorb kinetic energy during crash events. Impact and attenuator, also known as a crash cushion. Crash attenuator, or cowboy cushion, is a device intended to reduce the damage to structures, vehicles, and motors resulting from the motor vehicle collision. So, the airbags, right? So when they explode, the further you are from the bag, the less the less injuries that you're going to sustain. The closer to the bag exploding, the more likely you're going to experience some kind of impact injuries, but not to the severity of impacting a dashboard, because it's so solid, where the airbag will collapse as you impact it, right? So it'll absorb all that kinetic energy and release it in a way that's that won't produce injury, right? So all kinetic energy in a fist comes to a complete stop over a short distance, increases the force at impact. At the moment of the fist stops in a short time, as short a time as possible, force increases. So the faster the punch, the harder the punch, right? Either by minimizing the distance covered or time elapsed, right? So it's either over a short distance or the duration of the action is very short. That's what produces a significant amount of force. So again, this is just it's interesting because it provides a breakdown of how and why the 1-inch punch became famous. And if you doubt that it's famous, if you've seen the Kill Bill movies, when the bride is put in a wooden casket and buried, she uses the 1-inch punch to punch her way through the casket. So it does have relevance, and it is part of the pop culture. And again, it's something that I think martial artists are very aware of, and to a greater or lesser degree discuss it among themselves and try to implement that kind of thinking into the delivery of techniques, right? So it gives a kind of a basic understanding of what is going on with the 1-inch punch, right? The faster the punch, basically that's what you can reduce it to. The faster the punch, the harder the punch, right? And never at the full extension or the full range of the punch. It has to be over a shorter distance, because you're going, if you deliver a punch and you fully extend the arm, that you're going to lose a lot of that force at the end of the extension. But if the arm never completely extends, so you punch as though you're looking to extend the arm completely through whatever it is that you're punching at, but you want the punch to be delivered over a shorter distance and as fast as possible. And that's what produces the force, right? So now we'll move on to Fa Jin, right? So it's a term used in some Chinese martial arts, particularly the Neigong or internal martial arts such as Tai Chi. Um, um, It means to like issue or discharge power explosively or finding the explosive power, not specific to any particular method of striking. A boxer is capable of Fa Jin in the context of internal martial arts. The term usually refers to a set of methods to generate and focus force, resulting in physical feats such as the 1-inch punch. So they're attributed to this Fa Jin. And Jin is one of the three treasures of Qigong, and it's it's uh, it's interpreted as power and is often confused by Westerners with the related concept of Jing, which is essence, possibly because Jin is an adjective and it is also spelled J-I-N, J-I-N-G, which would be strong, right? And so the Jing is part of the system of Dantian. So the different power centers within the body, at least according to Chinese medicine, right? Um, and and at any rate, Jin describes the ability to generate force. Jin and Qi are intrinsically linked concepts in internal martial arts. To generate the Fa Jin, according to traditional explanations, requires the transfer of Qi from a Dan Tian, a concept of traditional Chinese medicine loosely translated as elixir field or sea of Qi or simply energy center. Dan Tian are the Qi focus flow centers. So they're three primary ones in Qigong, and you can draw and direct those energies. And in the case of Neigong and Neigong and Fa Jin, you can use it for martial purposes, right? So again, this speaks to force production, or the idea of force production. And it's important focal point, these energy fields or elixir fields or energy centers are important focal points for meditative and exercise techniques such as Qigong, martial arts such as Tai Chi, and its tradition, and in the tradition of Chinese medicine. So the idea is that it represents the focus of these internal energies for a martial purpose, right? So that there are specific practices to that end. And so, and as I understand it, according to Dan Inosanto, who was a close personal friend of Bruce Lee's, that Bruce Lee very regularly meditated, and so the speculation might have been Neigong or Neigong, these different forms of combative meditation or focus to that end. So these are the things that, like, I've found fascinating about the traditions and the mysticism that has risen up, and mystery that has risen up around martial arts. It's prevalent everywhere now. Like, you can see it in like all manner of like fighting games, that sort of thing. It's even worked its way in a manner of speaking into the Star Wars lexicon to be known as the Force. That somehow you can tap into these elixir fields or sea of Qi, these energy centers, to produce these substantial capacities. So there is a great deal of traditions that speak to that. So now, whether or not there's truth to it, I think it's more relevant to see that it suggests that it can have an external or outwardly effect. Now, to what degree can you manipulate reality, I don't know. I think that's, that would be, you know, that would be left up to the individual to discover if they even cared to. I've been meditating and training in the martial arts for an extremely long time, and I've never seen anything to illustrate that there are these hidden capacities, but not to suggest that they are. It just might mean that I'm not really that good at it, right? Which is, again, could be a potential reality and possibility. So anyway, having said that, Zhang, Qi, and Shen, these are the three treasures of traditional Chinese medicine. I've had episodes where we've covered this extensively. So, you can source those out on the YouTube channel. So the treasures of traditional Chinese medicine are substances, energies that we cultivate in Qigong and inner alchemy practices. These three things contribute to health, longevity of the human being. So Jing is the Chinese word for essence, and it's it's related to the kidneys, and the classical meaning signifies that it is purified, subtle, fine, and excellent, that it refines the energies, and much like our kidneys act to filter the things that we consume. Again, Jing might be seen as the energy center where we refine the energy. We can amplify it. So it governs the strength of our structure, frame, hair, nails, our healing powers, our sexual functions and reproductive potential, our youthfulness and ability to handle stress, adversity, overwork, and illness. So there, it's not a stretch then to imagine that what could possibly be going on with any kind of meditative practice for Jing is that that they might be tapping into that mind-body connection in the way that the placebo effect works and the nocebo effect is at work. So again, we know those things are actually quite real, right? Now, so that means that maybe that this represents a method that in the earliest times of the practice of Chinese medicine, that these three treasures actually could have produced that effect, and we know the effect is real. It's used by pharmaceutical companies to test the drugs that they want to take to market. The drug has to perform better than a placebo, right? Equal to or better than the placebo before it's able to go to market. So it's a very real world thing. We do understand that this is at work, and that the idea of the three treasures, Jing, Qi, and Shen, that they are somehow very closely related then to maybe the capacity to unlock or unleash the placebo effect in the way that you live. So then it would have substantial health benefits, right? And again, a depressed mentality or psyche could potentially lead to nocebo effect, inducing disease, or syndromes, which are disease process without a known origin for the disease process, right? So again, it speaks to the idea that like mind and body are connected, and through that mind-body connection, we can tap into things that can have a real potent effect, right? And it translates also into our martial capacity, right? In that, again, it's the subtleties of connecting the kinematic chains within the body, and training yourself to be able to maximize anything that you might do with regards to physical activity. But again, the three treasures transcends the purely physical, or at least that's their thinking. Now, qi literally means vapor or air or breath, and the word qi is often translated as vital energy or vital force or material energy or simply energy, right? So qigong is basically breath work, but it could also be seen as energy work or vital force work, right? So uh, some claim that it's a tangible force that allows energy transfer and movement, growth, and development to occur, with good health requiring its flow to be unimpeded. And within Chinese medicine, the body meridians are their focal point, because you can have blockages within the meridians. At least that's the thinking. The rationale is that that will prevent energy from moving. So it creates stagnation within the way the energy moves, which can lead to disease. So part of the practice then is to ensure that there are no blockages in the meridians, and so that it allows for energy to transfer and move and grow, to produce good health effects, right? Now, it is often considered pseudoscientific concept and does not correspond to the concept of energy used in the physical sciences, right? Like that, energy translates into work, like physical labor, and they're able to measure it in terms of like the amount of calories consumed to be able to produce an energy, like that's the amount of energy the body has to consume to be able to produce a physical effect, right? Qi, again, is a very metaphysical idea. I, my thinking is that the qi in and of itself and the practice of qigong is that it's a way to refine the mind-body connection. So again, for the purposes of good health. So nobody would dispute, and in fact, there's very good long-standing studies and research with regards to the positive effects of breath work in terms of how it impacts your physiology and your psychology. So that much is clear. So so in a manner of speaking, it's not pseudoscientific. The traditional way of viewing it, again, could be characterized as being pseudoscience fiction or scientific and exists outside of the material sciences, right? But again, that's for you, the individual, to discover. And maybe perhaps that's a point, that all of this is a discovery. It's all about learning whether or not there is something to this. And I've often heard that described that if you already go in with such a skeptical mind, that you're not open-minded, that you're convinced that none of this will work, that it doesn't work, that's how potent the mind-body connection is. So that in the mind-body connection, that you have to approach all of the stuff with a degree of openness and be open-minded to what it is that you're doing. And again, we know that through good studies, scientific studies, and research, that it does have an incredibly potent and powerful effect on your physiology and your psychology. But part of it is because the intention has to be there for that to occur. So if you go in with the thinking that it's irrelevant, it's not real, it's fiction, or it's just make believe, wishful thinking, then that actually very likely prevents you from being able to accomplish or achieve the results that you would going into it open and just simply receptive to whatever you might discover in the course of those practices. So now we're talking about, like, it is meditative practice, and we are referring to a meditative practice has a martial component, right? So that's really, again, part of it is like, this is the source of the 1-inch punch. right? So if you're fascinated by it, then you can see where maybe where it's relevant that these different meditative practices that help to contribute to significant force production. Now, whether you think that's pure physics or there's a metaphysical component, that's up to you to figure out. I don't have a leaning one way or the other. I'm open to. I see it being a bit of both, and I'm open to it being further explored. But again, it's not the thing that warrants research, time and effort and money. But to me, it's no less fascinating. Now, the Neigong, okay, so, oh, I'm sorry, we forgot Shen for the three treasures. I forgot Shen for the three treasures, which, it can also be referred to as spirit. It actually has three meanings. It refers to the human spirit or psyche that is seen in the body as luster or vigor, or in the mind as vitality and enthusiasm. So that's so very often, if you present with vitality and enthusiasm, and you're with a degree of vigor, even intensity, that is referred to as Shen, which is again equated as spirit, right? The power or agency within humans that accounts for life to further life to its fullest potential. Spirit, Shen, is transformed, is the transformation to actualized potential. So it's the potential that the things that could happen realized so that they no longer could, they do happen, right? So Shen is what allows for that. So those are the three components. So it's Shen, Qi, and forgive me, Jing, and they're like just briefly covering those because I am fairly certain that I have in a previous episode covered those in depth, but there's something that's there's something to me that's endearing about it, and you can see where now, like, if somebody like George Lucas had an awareness of this stuff, that it's not a stretch to imagine then that he envisioned like the Force as that he loosely based it on these metaphysical ideas, right? So again, to me, it's probably like one of the most interesting aspects to meditation, right? That the idea that you're manipulating energy centers within the body to produce, potentially fantastic effects. I'm still trying to figure out how to induce the placebo effect through meditation. To me, that would represent a critical move in medicine, a significant move in medicine. If you were capable of doing that we could produce that effect, and you could teach people how to do that, and that methodology could work universally, and then again have a profound change in the way medicine's practiced. So just something that worthy of like some kind of consideration. So we'll move on to Neigong, which is the internal strength or the internal skill, also spelled Neigong or Neigong or Neigong, and refers to a series of internal changes that a practitioner goes through when following the path to the Tao, right? So this again is a Taoist concept with which within Taoism the three treasures are highly prized, right? So it's Jing, Qi, and Shen. So and it's it's foundational in terms of the way that they practice their internal martial arts. Okay, so these changes may be achieved through practices including aforementioned practices of Qigong and Tai Chi. So I've just recently had a friend who's been doing Tai Chi for some time now actually exposed me to it, and I'm really fascinated by it, and as I'm aging, it seems to me that if I'm going to continue doing this, that this might be a direction to evolve in, or to move into. Again, I haven't determined whether or not I'm actually going to do that just yet, but it's something that's, again, very interesting, and ultimately it's whether or not you believe that you're refining, like through these practices, you're refining these energy centers, or you're just refining yourself as a human being. It's worthy of your time, energy, and effort. And I don't favor any one particular practice or methodology. What I want is I want evidence, and in lieu of evidence, just give me something that's interesting, right? And maybe loaded with very positive anecdotal accounts, because that might be a more interesting way to approach all of this. So now, having said that, Neigong or Neiging, the practice is normally associated with the so-called soft style or internal styles of Neigong, Chinese martial arts. I hope I pronounced that correctly, and I apologize if I didn't. As opposed to the category known as Weigong or external skill, which is historically associated with Shaolin Kung Fu or the so-called hard styles or external styles, or the Wajing Chinese martial arts. And again, I apologize if I've mispronounced that. Practitioners of Neigong can possibly develop many benefits, including faster recovery from injury, placebo effect, ability to hit with greater force. Again, a practice through the practice of any martial art, you'll very likely tap into something like, particularly if you're a serious practitioner or a serious student, the ability to move faster, like a raw speed. Now, because it's all high hand coordination, and many of the drills relate to that, that kind of speed you can amplify, and your physical ability to carry yourself, to and fro. Again, it's something that can be produced simply by practicing, a highly energetic and martial arts system that's based in like lots of gross body movements, lots of exercise, right? So it can yield that. But to these practitioners, it's an inherent part of that meditative practice, right? The health benefits of a relaxed state of being, and that, again, it does contribute to emotional maturity in the sense that you don't that you're not reactive, that instead of being reactive or responding violently like that, which is like in chemistry, that's a chemical reaction. They're usually quite violent. It allows for you the moment to pause and then choose a course of action. So again, you can see where that might be valued, right? A greater connection and awareness of, your legs, your spine, your arms, your head, like your entire body, a greater awareness of the body itself. Increased stamina, increased athletic ability and health, regulation of blood pressure, and we know this to be true. Even walking, like if you walk for an hour a day, it can lead to contributing to maintaining a healthy blood pressure. So all of these aspects or elements are part of these meditative practices, and most of these meditative practices revolve around the three treasures. The movement is a significant portion or part of those practices, as seen in like Qigong and Tai Chi. That movement, is still an integral part of the way that they're practiced. So this developing authentic Dantian is consciously nourished and deliberately formed, and it leads to greater sensitivity for sparring and fighting. That's why they've been so, I would go so far as to say it's why those meditative practices have been so closely related to the martial arts. I think because again, they allow for the refinement of the practice, which will allows for greater skill development, because essentially that's what we're talking about. Even the meditative practices are skill development. And we know, again, through good studies and research that has been ongoing since the 80s, like it's very serious, that that it has such a positive effect on the formation and the advancement of the nervous system, right? That it allows for greater expression in terms of intelligence and creativity. It mechanically creates a greater coherence between the left and right hemispheres of the brain, the firing of the nervous system itself. So all these things are, like, at least in the most physical sense, are positively affected. Although I can appreciate where some would rather put the emphasis on the metaphysical. I mean, and to me, that stuff's always fun. Chi magic. I mean, how could you not be, like, interested in that, or find that at least interesting? But is there a reality to it? And there may be, but like I said, in all my years of pursuit, I've not seen anything to demonstrate, like, Star Wars Force abilities in individuals. Although there are some individuals who, again, only anecdotally, can do some pretty astounding things. Now, having said that, in Java, Indonesia, there were filmmakers. There were documentary filmmakers, Lauren and Lawrence Blair, and their documentary is The Ring of Fire: An Indonesian Odyssey, and it's a series of 5 documentary films, including a decade-long Wander Ara European apprenticeship tradition that the Wandering Years, the filmmaker sibling partners, they in the course of their travels, they came across an individual that they knew as John Chang, or AKA Dynamo Jack. Now, you can find this all on YouTube, right? And allegedly, that he could focus his Qi Kung and breathing and internal system for more than movement and for muscles and flexibility. His system coordinated all these aspects, the aforementioned ones, and this heightened spirituality in his practice, which was rooted in Chinese medicine, philosophy, and martial arts. And he allegedly he lit paper on fire with his hands and stopped a BB pellet with his chi. And featured in that 1987 documentary Ring of Fire, he demonstrated energy control that defied physics. But when the footage was released without his consent, he vanished, never to be seen again. And more specifically, he was demonstrating that you could transfer chi, I believe it was into a chopstick, and tried to push it through a table. And I think the chopstick itself splintered and exploded, and it injured somebody. And then he was doing this for the filmmaker. So there wasn't a single meeting. They'd spent some time with him, and so the evening after that event, he, or at least they allege, that his master visited him in a dream and said, "What are you doing? You're not supposed to be sharing this stuff." And then the next day, he just simply disappeared, and they don't know what became of him. Now, having said all that, there are street magicians from places like Indonesia and throughout the Eastern world, where they can show you how to be able to light a crumpled up newspaper on fire. Now, it's super clever how they actually do this. What they'll do is they'll treat the paper with a particular chemical, and then then they'll place chemicals in their hand that when the two chemicals interact, they produce heat, and then because it's paper, that heat can be turned into fire. And there is demonstrations of this by these street magicians in the Far East. So it is a form of entertainment. But this John Chang also, he was applying Qigong in terms of healing, and he applied it to the sibling filmmakers, and they experienced like electrical, significant, when you it's the dead of winter and you're walking in socks and you touch the door and you get an incredible shock. They were experiencing that, but that was between his hands and their body. So again, you make of it what you will, but it speaks to this idea then that this sort of thing has been around forever. Now, whether they're charlatans perpetrating it for entertainment purposes or actually to really bamboozle people, or that they're more genuine practitioners who are like quasi-monks, the Shaolin monks, the Wu-Dang Taoists, who are all, again, deeply steeped and rooted in not just martial arts, but meditation, and combining the two to produce, or at least the claim is to produce these effects. So you take what you will from this. As far as I'm concerned, it just adds to the folklore. And when I listen to some researchers, and again, they would call this pseudoscientists, and it's quite controversial, but where they reference things like remote viewing, and the term psionics came from a piece of fiction, I'm not mistaken, from the 50s, and so now they refer to it as psi, and some of them make the claim that the psi abilities oh, excuse me. That came right out of nowhere. That the psi abilities are latent capacities within humans that that somehow we've forgotten, and through the right training methodology, much like the martial arts, you could produce the capacity to do these things like psychokinesis or telekinesis, telepathy, the clairvoyance, that sort of thing. I don't know if there's any truth to any of that stuff, but it surely does make for more interesting storytelling. And then it does have a dramatic carryover into fiction and pop culture. So for us, I think there's a fascination for for us as human beings with regards to this stuff. But what if it in this very strange way, that the reality is if the more humans that you have thinking that this stuff is genuine and real, then that contributes to it becoming real, right? I'm not saying one way or the other, because again, I haven't seen anything, and I haven't come across any research that's credible that would suggest that any of this is true. However, having said that, there are a number of individuals who do speak to that end. Now, and it is in line with the traditions that have sprung up around these meditative martial arts practices. So to me, it's just fascinating and fertile ground for great storytelling. The reality of it's probably somewhere in between the two. But what if it's some kind of lost potential or a lost capacity that lays dormant in all of us, that comes from that epoch or that time where we really don't know anything about our past beyond, say, 15,000 years. So even up to 10,000 years ago, our understanding of that time period, it's very it's sparse. And so anything beyond 15,000 years, and now with talk of, discovering, you know, a human skull and sedimentary layers that, and it was pieces of a skull that they again assembled, and it was a Homo sapiens sapiens skull, and and because of where they found it, it suggests that current contemporary modern day humans have been around for 500,000 years. So I find it hard to believe then we've only come into our own intellectually in just the last 10,000. So then so if that's true, and we've been on this earth for 500,000 years, and then occasionally experiencing a cataclysm that resets everything. What if these aren't just stories, but vague memories of a time when humans were doing this sort of thing? Again, there's no evidence for it one way or the other, or at least something that would be resistant to any kind of skepticism, or have evidence to be supportive of, which is kind of really the real important thing. It's evidence that would reinforce the validity of what we're talking about. But again, when you're discussing things that are in the realm of spirituality and part mythology and legend, I mean, there's some grain of truth perhaps to all of it, but the fact is that we don't have anything definitive that absolutely, beyond challenging it and suggesting that it's just all that, it's all meant to be entertaining and not to be taken more seriously. Now that's up to you, the individual. Myself, I have no intention of stopping meditation. I have no intention of stopping practicing the martial arts, although it's evolved into something different. So now my practice of the martial arts is more meditative than it is combat focused. That was something for a much younger person, and because I am advancing in age, and it's a real thing that we all have to consider. But I love the benefit of training in that way, and I love the camaraderie and the friendships that I've built over or through the martial arts. I've met some of the most interesting people. All of this is available to you, and available for the personal development of you as a human being, or as a single person, as a unique individual. And all it does ultimately then is it can amplify and refine the individual that you are, and can contribute to the realization of those potentials, so they're no longer potentials, they're a reality, right, in and of themselves. So again, I think it's the kind of thing that makes this whole conversation worth having, particularly if you're not somebody interested in the martial arts, and you're looking for something to enhance the way that you live, regardless of what age. There's something available to you, and that reflects the sensibility, every sensibility that's out there. So I would encourage, and I advocate for the idea that these should be commonplace and should be practiced out in public, in open view of everyone. We should see each other doing it. Again, that's encouraging, and it helps to promote the practice of the martial arts and meditation, which are just, again, they're just tools of refinement for the individual, if you want to reduce it to the most material thing. And that alone is reason enough. Now, if you manage to tap into something much more significant and metaphysical, good on you. Although, like I said, that shouldn't be the focus. You come at it open to how positively that it can benefit you, and then you just you follow it, and it's the kind of path, the way of living your life, and it doesn't ever have to stop. And I can tell you, I've been doing it for decades, and I don't whatever the initial focus was or reason for doing it, those have fallen away a long time ago. Now it's just about the fact that it's worth doing. So for me, that's reason enough. It's worth doing. So I think I've reached the point where maybe we've covered this as effectively as possible. I want to show you my Bruce Lee T-shirt before I sign off. I don't know if you can see that, but all right. I really do like Bruce Lee. I think I've said this before on a number of occasions. Now, having said all that, that if whoever you are listening to this, if you've ever considered the martial arts, remember that there's no such thing as too late or that you're too old. There's some form of practice, and it's a great way to, again, refine yourself as an individual, and it can introduce you to an extended network of individuals or a community that's where you're there because of your common interest, which again, isn't that how we build connections with each other? And maybe that's the point ultimately to all of this, right? So I would like to say in closing, question everything, including yourself, especially yourself. Seek balance, seek knowledge, seek understanding, become a renegade, individualist, humanist, critical objective thinker. Thank you for your time, wherever you are, day or night. I appreciate you being here.